a little hard if you don't see it. Maybe you should
I'll
stop
just use it here.
and do it again.
No, if you can see it,
No, but you have
if you can
to
see it.
scroll down.
Oh, that's
Okay.
true.
Stop it and start again.
It won't start again. I'm telling you, it's just giving me a headache.
No.
Don't know what to do.
Okay, don't put it right in. You just send it stuff. You don't have to share screen. Okay.
Okay. I'll try doing that, and then I'm sorry, Litzor, that I'm taking a break here for 1 second. Okay, we're gonna go back to Daf Dalet again. Sorry. I don't like it when the whole thing is just. Everything is super duper slow this morning. Okay, I've shared the daf with you also, so maybe that'll be helpful. Okay, if you can't get it on the reel, you'll get it on the thing. Okay, so we're going back to daf dalet already. We've kind of. I hope Elitzur you can see me, and I'm taping, so hopefully this will work, and we'll go from there. Okay, so we spent the last 2 weeks on the Bamina of Nachman Yitzchak, 5 lines from the bottom, 6 lines from the bottom of Daf Dalet Amud Aleph. The Gemara asks as follows: Bamina of Nachman Bar Yitzchak, Hamaskir Ba'id Lechaver Ba'arbasar Chizkato Baduk or Ein Chizkato Baduk. So again, here we're talking about, this is not on the sheet. This is from the last 2 weeks. If you read it on the morning of, we talked about the kinyan of Masir and Maftecho that we talked about 3 weeks ago. Then the last couple of weeks we've been talking about this question. You know that it was in the Maskir's house on the 14th in the evening, but when in the morning came, he rented to you. This is like the hotel case. And do we assume that it can be baduk or not, right? Which is, we said already, maybe might just be a question of to what extent does someone do mitzvah or not, right? Can we assume that the guy did the mitzvah or not? It says the Gemara, Laman nafkamina lishayle, and we said the last 2 weeks on that word lishayle, right? The box reading of this Gemara is we have no idea whether it's chaskato baduk or not, but well, let's just ask him. But the standard reading in the Rishonim is that we know chaskato baduk, and yet efshal lavar tzarich lavar. This is why I really missed you, because this was a super interesting sugya. It's a big debate among the Rishonim. If I can check it out, do I have to check it out? Even if I know that it's a chazaka, or to what extent do chazakas demonstrate some sort of absoluteness? So that's a question we raised in a number of different formulations. The last thing we did was we worked on the Rambam. Right? Most of the Rishonim seem to think that even if you say Efshel Lavar, Tzarech Lavar in most places, you might not need to say it in Chametz. The Rambam seemed to say the opposite, right? That even if you say Efshel Lavar, Eno Tzarech Lavar, you might need to do it in Chametz. We talked about the Ravid's formulation on Daf Tet, that maybe all of B'digat Chametz was formulated as on a suffix. You remember that? Right. That might be very, very illustrative of something bigger in B'digat Chametz, but that's not for now. That's what we did the last couple of weeks. But Dov, I really thought of you because I really thought you would be interested in that sugya in particular. Okay, so it says the Gemara, what?
You're taught a lot.
Yeah, fair. So I didn't think about that, but I didn't know about that. Okay, so Efshel Lavar, Tzarech Lavar, do you have to check it out? Okay, so the Gemara says, so the guy's not there to ask him. Okay, so if the guy's not there to ask him, then we have to ask, is there a chazaka or not? Do we make this new guy, the renter, the guy who's coming into the hotel room, since that we don't have, the chambermaid is not available, or let's say we talked about the example in Orlando, because that's a better example, where the Chabad guy, leaves the keys in a lockbox, so he's not there to ask. We have obviously it's Erev Pesach, so there's no way to reach him. So then the question is, what do you do? Can you assume that it's baduk or no? So the Gemara says, do we make you do b'diga chametz? I'm Rav Nachman Yitzchak, who's the dominant character on this page. Tini tuha, we have a brayta. Hakol ne'emanim al biur chametz, which we're going to assume means b'diga. Everybody is believed. Afilu nashim, afilu avadim, afilu ketanim. So everybody is believed. That's the text we're going to study today. My time in Mehemni. Why do we believe these people in b'diga chametz? Lav mishum de chezkato baduk. Isn't it because they're just adding on to chezkato baduk? We already know the chezkato baduk, and now what we're trying to do is figure out can we trust them, in addition to them? Right? In other words, Gemara says no. No, the reason we believe them is not because Chazkato Baduk or not Chazkato. We have no way of knowing Chazkato Baduk or not Chazkato Baduk. The point is that everybody's believed regarding B'dikat Chametz. The Tanya, as we have a brighter that says something similar. If you have a chaver who died, someone who's usually trusted, and he left a bowl of fruit on the table, even if they were picked that day, we can assume that you can just eat them. We assume that the chaver, before he died, managed to take true and meiser, or to relieve them of their tevel status. So maybe this case is different because they actually said something. So the Gemara says, right? In other words, maybe that's why we believe them. In other words, we don't have to necessarily rely on Cheskato Baduk, just like we say over there, the Chazak is the Chaver did something. So here also we're going to assume Cheskato Baduk. No, maybe here there's an additional factor where it's Cheskato Baduk, might be true, but it might not be true. But in this case, the child, the Evid said something, and because of that we believe him. The Gemara says, Hani atu amira the hani mini mashashe food. Does their statement add anything? Elamai Cheskato Baduk. So we must say Cheskato Baduk, and that's why we believe them. So the Gemara says, Haya kol ne'emanim. So then why would the Mishnah say Akol ne'emanim regarding B'dikat Chametz? It should say Kol habatim Cheskat Badukim Arba Asar Mevada. It should have said that. Right? It should have said something about the chefza, not about the person. Elamai mishum damir the hani mishum damir the hani. Because is it because of their statement that we believe them? How lo amar lo. And if they didn't say anything, then you wouldn't say it. So tifsha mina ein Cheskato Baduk. Right? So maybe we can go the other way and say no, Cheskato is not Baduk. It's only because they said something. So the Gemara says lo Cheskato Baduk. V'chamayiskin the muchsalan the lo badak. The kamarani badkine. We'll come back to that here in a few minutes. Right? In other words, what happened? We have a Cheskato. This case is a unique case. It's an outlier case. We have a chazaka that it wasn't Baduk. In other words, for example, the Chabad guy who gave you the keys in Orlando doesn't even live in Orlando. Right? In other words, there was no one Jewish there. It was just the non-Jew who was living in the apartment before him. Because of that, we can assume that it wasn't Baduk. And therefore we say, and they say we checked it. We might have thought that the rabbis don't believe him. Since B'dikat Chametz is the Rabbanon, because already you did bitul, right? You did bitul, and it's unlike Rashi on Daf Bet, which says B'dikat Chametz is to overcome the problem of Bayir Matzah. Here we're assuming you did B'dikat Chametz. You already did bitul. So him knew Rabbanon, but the Rabbanon. So we believe the women in the case of the Rabbanon. Okay. So this opens up the question of, again, this Gemara, the simple way I would read it, right? There's a couple of things that are outstanding. What exactly did the women say? Did they say, the women, children, the Avadim, did they say, we checked it, Batkine, or did they say someone else checked it? That's not clear yet. We'll see that in the Ravid towards the end of this year. But before we get to that, we have to ask ourselves, okay, what's the status of the testimony or the statements of women, children, and slaves, right? Here the Gemara says, Himnu Rabbanan b'Durabbanan, right? We will believe them, right? Since Bittul Ba'al Masagile, we will believe them in Durabbanan, right? And again, I'm making the following set of assumptions. Number one, there was bitul already. In other words, there was bitul that knocks B'dikat Chametz, even according to Rashi, down to a Durabbanan. And once it's Durabbanan, we can believe them in a Durabbanan. On what level do we believe them? We have no idea, right? What they said, we don't exactly know. Our gear says they said we checked it, but we don't know the extent to which we believe them. So the first thing I want to talk to you about today is a position of the Farot that's cited in the Meiri, where the Meiri has somewhat of somewhat of an outlandish shita. He takes the Gemara very, very seriously. Says the Meiri, this is source one in front of you, or the first source in front of you, the Beit HaBachira. Again, I apologize. I don't know. I hope you can see it online. I don't see it, but Eliezer says he sees it. It just says my screen sharing is paused. I'm going to just try to stop it and try it again and see what happens. Okay. Hello, Michael. Oh, now I see it. Okay, great. So let me just. Oh, now it says it's paused again. It's got some quirk in it, and it's not letting me show the screen. Okay. Anyway, I hope you can see it. If you can't, you'll just listen along. Says the Meiri, according to this Gemara, if I take this Gemara very seriously, which says that the rabbis believe the women and children and slaves regarding b'dikat chametz because there was already bitul, shavadim v'ktanim v'nashim k'sherim livdok et chametz. They're trusted to do b'dikat chametz. Uv'katan miyadafka b'sheyesh lo dat livdok. And a katan only if he has dat. Shema mitoch ma shekatavnu ata gomer et adin. Because you might have thought shekol shehu min haTorah ein ne'emanim. You might have thought anything that's biblical they're not believed. Alav lo isha v'lo eved lo katan sharei lo amru kan elahim nu rabbanan d'rabbanan. So you might have come to the conclusion that really we don't believe them in any doraitas. U'mikom makom. So he says that would have been the natural conclusion from our Gemara. U'mikom makom tzarich shedash ein hadavar muchlat. This is not absolutely true. This is not a foolproof principle that we don't believe women, children, slaves in anything at all doraita. Ela sheyesh machloket bezeh ben hamefarshim. There's a big machloket. Sheyesh mehem notim ladat zeh. Right? Some people actually lean towards this. Right? This is what we saw at the end of the last class, that we don't trust on women. We don't trust women when there's actually an isser, when there's cheskat isser. And therefore, if you want to peel off the fats from the kosher meat or from the what's it called, the sciatic nerve. So since there's a cheskat isser there, right? In other words, the sciatic nerve starts off being asser, you can solve it by peeling it off. They're not believed. If a woman comes and tells you, right, according to this position, that they picked the fruit off your tree and they were meiser, we don't believe them. But isser Torah. And according to this, sorry, did I just read that? I just read that. Right? If she gives him food that's not meusar, if she doesn't take off challah or she doesn't go to the mikvah, if you know that meiser wasn't taken, so why the heck are you eating it? You shouldn't divorce her because of that. Right? And if he doesn't know, so on what basis can he divorce her? How can he possibly say, you gave me fruit that wasn't meiser? When it comes to nida, so either if you know, you shouldn't be sleeping with her, and if you don't know, trust her. So the Gemara says, words, and the Gemara says, and after all, neither we know, because it says v'safra Allah, she's supposed to do it. Alma, this is the critical line. In other words, this is the extreme position. You can't trust women in doraitas. The only one doraita you can trust a woman in is in the mikvah, that she went to the mikvah because that's her special din, right? Habishari surula. Okay. How do we trust women to clean? I forget, women, children, slaves to clean lettuce? Because there's no chesed isser. But when there is a chesed isser, we cannot trust women, children, slaves. That's the outlying shita. So it's that, but he says that would emerge directly from our Gemara. It's our Gemara could be the locus classicus of when we don't trust women. We don't trust women. Our Gemara says, "Hemnu rabbanim b'derabbanim." We trust a woman. You would need bitul. Understand? In other words, if you take this Gemara seriously, says the Meiri, then you end up with the conclusion that we can't trust women, children, or slaves in anything doraita where there's a chesed isser. Again, not anything doraita. Anything doraita where there's a chesed isser, right? But again, the chesed isser he expands pretty far, right? In other words, he says. When it comes to, right, you would differentiate between hydroponics, that obviously would be okay, lettuce, and lettuce grown in a regular field where there's resource, extermination, or whatever it's called, and in an organic field. An organic field, maybe there is a chesed isser, there's tolaim. If there's chesed isser, tolaim, then we can't trust women, children, slaves to, I hate to tell you that it's to give you the lettuce, exactly. And tefel. There's clearly a chesed isser of, I guess clearly, there seems to be a chesed isser. So you can't trust women that, right, according to this position of the Meiri. Right? Nida v'safrala. In other words, we take the Gemara and Ketubot very seriously. V'safrala, that's a woman's, in other words, the din of a woman has to count 7 days, so that's her mitzvah. Special din of Nida. Right? That's the outlying shita. That when it comes to slaves and children, we can't trust them when there's chesed isser. Aval nashim af beiser Torah ne'emanu. Right? So then what do you do with our Gemara? We trust women when it comes to biblical laws. So what does it mean? El B'nei Avadim Yuktanim, Hanashim Ne'emanot Hu Af B'Shel Torah. Where he rereads our Gemara. He says, "What are you talking about? We can't take the Gemara Safra less seriously. That's the only place. Obviously, we trust women in everything. Children, slaves, they're more marginalized, right? Because they have less dat. But we can't not trust women." And we'll see this again in the Rishonim in a couple of minutes, right? But again, the Meiri puts out the position that maybe not just in neither do we trust women, we trust women in everything. When it says in our Gemara, Himnu Rabbanan B'Durabanan, we only trusted women, we only trusted people Durabanan in Durabanans, that was talking about slaves and children, but not talking about women. Women we can believe Midoraita. Okay? And then he has to re-explain the Gemara in Ketubot a little, because the Gemara in Ketubot seems to say it's a special din in the Kata, the Safra law. Okay? So that's in our initial gambit. In other words, we have our initial gambit says, how seriously do we take this Hemnu Rabbanan Durabanan? The first position in the Meiri, which is an outlying Shita, is that we actually don't trust women ever, except in V'Safra. When there's a Cheskar Yisrael, we just don't trust women.
Of course, Judaism fall apart.
Right, Judaism would fall apart at this point. Again, this might streamline with the Havamina and the Yerushalmi. I don't know if you remember this, that women aren't chayav in chametz, right? Were it not for the pasuk that connects them to the chiyuv matzah. They say chametz is we talked about Isher Zman, right? The chametz is an Isher Zman. It's a mitzvah that says Zman grama, so women aren't chayav in chametz, right? So they're not chayav in chametz. They can eat chametz on Pesach, but that the Gemara says, were it not for,
why would they be?
It's a mitzvah. It's a lotas. You're right. One second. Why did the Gemara say that? The Gemara says the lotas doesn't apply to them for some reason. Such a havmin exists. I have to go back and find it again. Then the Gemara says because they're chayiv in matzah, they're chayiv in chametz. Okay. Anyway, but all this, of course, raises the question: on what basis could we say that women are trusted or not trusted? After all, we know the Torah says you need 2 eidim for everything. So at what point do we say that, so this isn't exactly Eidut, when they come along and say something happened. So the question is, what is it? Right? So Tosfot on our page, we'll start with Tosfot on our page just because it's on our page, but then we'll move to the 3 different sources for this thing. So Tosfot on our page says, Hemnu Rabbanan B'Durabanan. Again, Michael, just tell me, can you see the sources or not? You're mute.
Yeah.
You can see the sources. Okay.
I can say Beta Bechira, the Meiri.
Okay, do you see the Tosfot or you don't see the Tosfot?
I don't think you've scrolled, have you?
I haven't scrolled because I can't see it on my page. I don't know why I can't scroll it. But I sent you in the thing.
Yeah, you sent it to us, right.
So just look in the. I'm sorry that I just can't seem to. It just doesn't want to give me anything here. Doesn't want to help me. Okay, I'm sorry. Okay, maybe Daniel will be able to do it. So Tosfot says as follows: Oh, this introduces a new topic. Biyadam. They're capable of doing it themselves. Says Tosfot. No, of course we believe women. We believe women and children and slaves all the time when they're able to do it, when they're capable of doing something. Because when they come along and say it was done, if they could have done it, then we should trust them. It happens every single day that we trust women and slaves. Right? On slaughtering, they say this is kosher meat, right? If your wife goes to the store, forgive me, I don't mean to make judgments here, but if your wife goes to the store and says, I bought it in a kosher store, so you trust her, right? Because she can get in the car and go buy it in a kosher store, so we trust her to say that you did, right? Tosfos says it's like it's an obvious thing, right? So why here do we have to say Himnu Rabbanan B'Durabanan? Says Tosfot. Why here? All of a sudden on Pesachim Daf Daled, we're challenging everything, as Danny says. We've challenged all of Judaism by saying, right? We're challenging your kitchen, we're challenging your wife's capacity to shop, or you're sending your children to the store. How could that possibly be? Right? Says Tosfos even quotes the Gemara in Ketubot without going to the nuances. He says, "We got with Perikamadir Gabi Ma'achilatosha Enu Musar Mashmash Somachalav Linyan Chalo Ma'aseh." The Gemara in Ketubot, the way Tosfos reads it, says we trust her for. Right? Tosfos doesn't take the Safra a lot too seriously. He says we trust her for Chala, for Meiser. So how could it possibly be that all of a sudden the Gemara is saying only in Durabanans we trust her?
Well, let me share.
So it says Tosfot, what?
If the host had to allow me to share.
Oh, okay. So how do I do that? No. maybe participants. Try this. Click on participants. See if we can roll over me some of that now. We'll try this. Can make me co-host. That should do it. Okay. So says Tosfot, Mikom Makom, he says, B'digat Chametz is the outlier. And as before we said, you remember in the Meiri we said that Nida is the outlier, that's the only Doraita? Says Tosfot, no. We have a much wider set of circumstances where we trust people. We trust women and children and slaves in everything, basically. After all, says Tosfot, the key line, Masim b'chol yom. It happens all the time, right? Mikom Makom, the Gemara in Pesachim is the outlier. Kabe b'dikat chametz, right? Af al gav to be adam, even though it's in their hands to do it. Mikom makom ihavi doraita, right? Had you not done bitul chametz, even though it's biyada, right? You follow the differences? They're capable of doing it, but since it's midoraita, lo mehamnin, we wouldn't believe them. Why not? Mishum diika tircha yeterata, because it's a huge effort it's an enormous effort to do b'digat chametz, and because it's an enormous effort to do b'digat chametz, you can't trust women or children or slaves, right? But and he adds also v'tzarich diktu gadol. So it needs two things. It's a huge headache, and it requires a lot of effort. It requires a lot of meticulousness. Okay, so he said women are lazy. Right? That doesn't mean atzlaniyot. It means that women and children and slaves can't be trusted. So in other words, were it not for the midoraita v'bitul ba'al masagi, and this is only the rabbanon, we wouldn't have believed women because it's such an effort, right? Given that atzlaniyot, they probably shouldn't believe me either. But okay, but you understand the point. The point is that Tosfos says I have a very wide scope. In other words, unlike the Meiri's first interpretation, I have a very thin scope of where we believe women, right? I'm only going to believe them in Mesafrala or where there's no Chesed Isur. Tosfos says, no, I have a very, very wide scope of where I believe. I believe in everything pretty much. After all, Maisim b'chol yom, that we believe women in Chala and Maiser and Nikur and Shrita. But says Tosfot, B'digat Chametz is unique, right? Ironically, right? This might fit into the Ravid, Danny. Right? What did the Ravid say last week? The whole thing is Nitkan ala Safeh. So Tosfos adds another dimension to B'digat Chametz. B'digat Chametz is it requires a much greater effort and much greater meticulousness. Those are the two factors that Tosfos brings up, and because of that, you can't just trust anybody, right? Now, again, no. Tosfos' biyanto is very fascinating, because Tosfos seems to indicate that what's the woman saying? She couldn't be believed to say that she did it, but would she be believed according to Tosfos to say that he did it? Very possible.
What's the Shkita scenario? Did she do it or is she reporting to somebody else?
That's not clear in Tosfot. That's not clear 100% in Tosfot. But I assumed it meant, again, it would be hard for me to imagine that Tosfot, even though Tosfot does allow, the first Tosfot in Chulin does allow women to do Shchita, but it would be hard to, right? That's the first Tosfot in Chulin. But that being said, it would be hard for me to imagine that Tosfot is saying, Masim b'chol yom, that we trust a woman because it's biyado lasot Shchita and she does it herself. There are some indications. You have to ask Ardon. He has pictures of women doing Shchita and Mila and stuff like that, but I don't think that was like a normative practice but anyway, but you're right, Danny. You caught me a little because I wanted to say that the biyado means, in words that Tosfos wouldn't say it, but in the Shchita case, you're right. The Tosfos does seem to indicate that she's even talking about. No, but there Tosfos says we believe her. There, it's not like a tircha for her to do it. I'm saying the tircha would only be if she's testifying about herself, then we can't believe her. Right. But if she's testifying about someone else, that's not such a meticulous. That doesn't require diktuk gadol, right? It's either she saw him do it or she didn't see him do it. Okay. Then Tosfos opens up another thing, which I'm going to put in parentheses. I'm going to read it, because I want to finish our Tosfots. But I don't want to talk about it too much. It says Tosfos, what about Tchumin? Right? Tchumin means, that how far the Tchum Shabbat goes. The Tchumin D'Rabbanan, Mamnin le'isha ve'eved velo katan. So it says, I'm aware that there's another nuance here. The Tchumin, we believe women and slaves, but we don't believe children. Midatanya Ketzad Ma'arvin, that's the Gemara in Eruvin. Afilu Eved v'afilu Shivcha ne'emar lomar ad kan tchum Shabbat. Aval ktanim lo. right? So when it comes to tchum, we can believe women and children. We have to figure out why tchum is different than bedikat chametz. So the Gemara says, right, degree tfei, it's worse, right? This doesn't why it's worse. He just says tchumen is worse. Midachashav lu b'shmaitim b'sof u'beperak sheni d'ktuba. The Gemara is bringing it up in a couple of places. Elu ne'emanim laha'id begodlan masherau bekotnan.
Wow.
In which they're believed to say when they were bar mitzvah, I remember when I was 5, this is what it looked like. And one of the examples is Ad kan hayinu malchin b'Shabbat. They could say, I remember Dad used to walk me out here, and then we would stop right here, right? You have Meir Ad kan tchum Shabbat, whatever, right? Mashma aval b'kotnan. They're believed to say when they're bar mitzvah, they're believed aval b'kotnan lo. So it says that kind of that's a thorn in my side. Right? Why is it a thorn in my side? Because I wanted to say the Nashim Avadim Muktanim have a very wide scope. They're believed in everything. So why all of a sudden here we have a Durabanan, whereas I want to believe they're even believed in Doraitas, and you're in Durabanan of Tchum Shabbos, they're not believed. Right? So just remind you, Tchum Shabbos is Durabanan in most cases. It's Doraita when you get to 12,000 amot, the size of the Machaneh. Right? But we never get there. Here the Gemara is talking about 2,000 amot. Okay? So he says, Tosfos says, I'll tell you why. Hainu mishum the tchumin ein biadam klal, lekach ein ne'emanim k'mo b'dikat chametz. With tchum Shabbat, they're just testifying about something else altogether. They're not talking about anything they could do or not do. They're just talking about a historical fact, right, or an objective fact. It's not exactly the same thing. Since it's not biyadam, so Tosfos wants to have some sort of hybrid. On one hand, biyadam. It's not they couldn't have done them. They couldn't have affected the change in the mitzvah. B'dikat chametz, they can affect the change. Shchita, they can affect the change. Anything they can affect the change. Here, it's just a fact.
A katan could use pita? Is that what they mean?
I'm not sure. I don't remember. I don't think so. I think with a gadol al agabav he can. Right? In other words, if there's this older person standing there to make sure, but in principle the shechita should be kosher.
Okay.
Right? So, but here it's not biyad at all. In other words, here when they're testifying about a fact, it's something different. So I wanted to put that in its first place. But again, the Tosfos, in contrast to the Meiri, very, very mitzvah sam. Right? We only believe women, children in Doraitas, especially when it's cheskat iser. As opposed to Tosfot, who says, no, it's very, very wide. B'dikat chametz is the outlier. Our Gemara is the exceptional case, because b'dikat chametz is super unique. Okay, what comes out in Tosfot, there's two discussions that I want to have in Tosfot. The first one is the first thing, what's the source of Eidach Hanem and Visur? And the second one is what's the nature of the biyado. So let's talk about the first one first. What's the source? So Tosfot here says, the source is Masim B'chol Yom. Normative practice indicates that we trust women and children, because otherwise, how would we look? Which it fits into the general Tosfot that normative practice takes on halachic significance in many, many respects, right? Tosfot in Gittin, this we studied last year, says Eidach Hanen Man B'Yisur in there. Right? Thank you, Danny. So Perusha Kuntrus, Sharehem Mina Torah, the Torah trusts, right? Kol echad ve'echad al afrashat truma v'shchita v'nikur hagid v'chelev. Okay, so Rashi doesn't say Ba'asim b'chol yom. He says there's a biblical verse. He doesn't tell us what it is, that the Torah believes all these people regarding, and he gives a few examples that are a little different than the ones Tosfos gave. Right? Truma, Shchita, Nikur, and Chelev. Nikur Agid and the Chelev. Says Tosfot in Gittin, Lo lo laskir afrashat Truma v'shchita. He says he shouldn't have brought those up. Tosfos says there's two different categories here in Rashi, and Rashi should have differentiated between them, right? Some of them are itchazik isura, right? There's a cheskat isur, right? In other words, we assume it's a problem unless you do something, but you have biyado that kind of counterbalances the cheskat isur. That's not why we believe them. We believe them because it's biyado. Or to put it differently, Tosfos has this, right? If I go to the second issue first, I really want to go to the first issue second, but okay. Tosfos says that biyado and Eidach Hanem and Visur are two totally different things. Tosfos says there's one track called biyado. If you have biyado, that overcomes the problem of cheskat isur, and then of course we believe you. That's not Eidach Hanem and Visur, and that's biyado, right? Do you see that? That's like a totally different thing. If you're biyado, it's not the biyado bolsters your Eidach Hanem and Visur. Biyado is a different track to get you to trusting you. Right, exactly. It's not an issue of ne'emanu. It's not that you're trusted. It's just that we know you did it. Right? That's not we trust you to say it was done. That's we assume you did it. If you say you did it, right? Or you say it was done, we assume you did it. Or the fact that it's biyado lets us assume you did it. So Tosfos says, I don't like the examples that Rashi gave for Eidach HaNe'eman B'Yisurin because it's a totally separate halacha of biyad, though, right? In other words, the Gemara brings up that example, right? It says it's biyado. Dimkren amay mehemen came in chazak isur. The lo matzinu b'shum makom sheyitzarech begadol echad omed al gabav. Right? In other words, we shouldn't require any place gadol omed al gabav if for a second I just got confused. Shchita afagav dahashta ein biyado latak. No. Ikar havidol l'shchot. Dimken lo ama. Dimloken amay mehemen. Right. If it's already shachud, you're not right. You can't be believed, right? ומעשים בכל יום דמם, אף אגב זה לא שייך רוב מצוין את השחית המומחין הן, כגון שנחתך כל הראש, ואין בית השחית הניכר. Okay, so, again, I don't want to go into that right now, but then now we get to the point that I do want to get to. מה שאנו סומכים על אנשים בשחיטה, אף על פי שאין יודעות הלכות שחיטה, Danny, your question, כיוון דבידה ללמוד לשחוט, או להזכיר לאחרים שישחטו לו, כבידה דמי. So that says, my track of biyada has a very wide thing. Since they could learn hilchot shchita, but it's not they have to know it, be able to do it right now. The very fact that they could have done it, they could have learned hilchot shchita, or the very fact that they could find someone to shech for them, that's biyada. Okay. Then Tosfos says, how do I know? He says, I'm going to use the Meiri's line, but I'm going to teach it broad, right? Because it says v'safar la la'atzma. Right. So unlike the Meiri who says we only trust women in Doraita's in Nida, right? And the right Tosfos says, I'm going to learn that we Eidach HaNe'eman B'Yisurin.
This is a powerful statement. Because this affects
everything.
Agents in general.
Yafe. Exactly. Right. So Tosfos says that, right? Tosfos seems to take, he has a biblical verse, right? Rashi says, Himnu Torah. Tosfos by us says, Ma'asim b'chol yom. Here he says, we trust women. Then Tosfos says, 1 second, do I have to rein this in a little? Could this be that we trust women for everything? Would that be even if there's a chesed isur? Tosfos says, I'm not going to go so far as to say we trust women when it's chazek isura. There already we need something more. A woman doesn't have, right, is not pure or is neither kol shah. She's not roy adam but kol shah. Shiva Torah mimela, since it happens automatically that she's no longer tamei, assuming she went to the mikvah, v'lo itchazek isur v'gam biyada litbol, and since she can also go to the mikvah, so the combination here doesn't mean we trust women all the time. Eidach HaNe'eman B'Yisurin, we would trust a woman, but not against itchazek isur. Itchazek isur, we're not going to trust women, right? But so Tosfos he wants to have it both ways. He wants to have his cake and eat it too, basically. He says, I'm not like the Meiri's camp that I'm only going to trust women in Nida. I'm willing to trust women a lot more than Nida. I'm willing to trust them basically in every Durabanan, that's Tosfos by us, but only up till B'digat Chametz, where we might have had a Havmi that we wouldn't trust them, and then we have to answer it in. But Tosfos says, I'm willing to trust women in Doraitis also if it's not Itchazik Isur, if there's no Chesed Isur. So we have to figure out when is Chesed Isur, when isn't. Tosfos says Nida is the Chesed Isur, right? Because he has to reread the whole story of Nida, even though the woman, right, obviously is going to bleed and she has to go to the mikvah, but that's still not a Chazak Isur because it's Biyada Litbol. So that's how Tosfos resolves it. Here I'm not sure he's using the same definition of Biyada as a different, whereas Biyada is like a totally different track, because here he wants to use Biyada together with Eidach HaNe'eman B'Yisurin. That being said, Tosfos has a much more moderate position. But Tosfos again uses V'safra law as the source for Eidach HaNe'eman B'Yisurin. So that's why we have two different sources for Eidach HaNe'eman B'Yisurin. Either Ma'aseh B'chol Yom, right? Look what's happening. It must be that we trust women. Or V'safra law, which Tosfos again says first in a very bold statement, but then he kind of reels it in a little. He says not against the Chazak Isur. There is a third source, and that's the Sifri in Dvarim. The Gemara says as follows. The pasuk says, "Lo yakum eid echad beish l'chol avon l'chol chatat." Right? You just went a little too far. Right? In other words, you can't have eid echad. What do you mean eid echad ne'eman b'yisurin? The Torah says you can't have eid echad. So what the heck are you saying that eid echad is ne'eman b'yisurin? Right? So the Gemara says, "Lo yakum eid echad beish l'chol avon l'chol chatat b'chol chet asher yacheta If someone stole or someone murdered, you can't do it. Says the Sifri. Talmud Lamar ish la'avon, right? What is ish la'avon? Lo yakum ish beish l'kol avon, right? Ish la'avon eino kam. One person cannot come up for a chat, eino kam. Kam hu beisha lahasiya. In other words, when it comes to avon, you can't do it. But just to testify that a woman's husband died and therefore she can get married, that's not an avon.
Mm-hmm. That's
That's an isurim, right? That's an isur, right? She was married to someone. You can come along and testify that he died. Diva Rabbi Yehuda. Rabbi Yossi Omer la'avon eno kam hu l'shvua. The 1 aid is not enough to indict someone, but it is enough to be mechai from a shvua. And remember, we pass like Rabbi Yossi. We pass like Rabbi Yossi that an eid echad can be, if 1 aid comes along and says you stole from somebody else, you have to take a shvua that you didn't. Right? You don't have to give the money back, but you have to take a shvua. Okay. What's the difference whether we believe that this is part of edut? Right? It's essentially the question I want to ask is, when we talk about eid echad and beisurin, is that eid echad and beisurin like edut in avon, or is that eid echad and beisurin in the world of ne'emanut? Right? In other words, we have a different track, just like we saw a few minutes ago that biyado might be a different track than eid echad. So here I wanted to raise the question: when we say the word eid echad ne'eman beisurin, what does that mean? Does that mean when we do believe in eid, whenever we believe in? Let's say when it comes to Ida, does she believe like two? Does she have all the right? Does she have all the dinim of Edu? Right. Or is this a different track called Ne'eman? What we talked about before, Ne'emanut. Eid echad Ne'eman be'isurin. We trust you, but it doesn't have the status of Edu. So what's the best way to filter this question, to test it? Well, let's ask ourselves, what unique halachot do we have of an Edut? And ask them, does it apply to an Eid echad? Or does it apply to a woman? Understand? So we have one super unique halacha that applies to Edut, right? We have Drisha v'Chakira, right? We know we have to investigate, that's one thing. But we have an even more extreme case. Sometimes we kill Eidim. Right, Eid Zomim, the first chapter of Masechet Makot, right? Would we apply Eidim Zomim into Eid Echad Ne'eman Beisurin? Right, in other words, if the answer is going to be yes, then I know that the Eid Echad is believed like Eidut. If the answer is going to be no, then I won't, right? You follow that? You remember Eidim Zomin, right? That's if, right? Eidim Zomin doesn't mean if they were caught lying. It means they were caught lying in a particular way called Imanu Hayitim, right? In other words, you couldn't have possibly known that, right, that the Truma was taken on this. You, Mrs. Schwartz, couldn't possibly known, or Evan Schwartz couldn't possibly known that the Truma was taken. Because when you claimed the Truma was taken, you were with me. We were swimming. So you couldn't possibly know that, right? So now, do we punish the Eid Echad? Right, you follow? Yeah. So here we have Machokas Achronim. To what extent do we punish the Eid Echad? Now, there is a small thing that I have to add here, which is the Machoket. I'm not exactly sure what to do with this. Everybody talks about this in this context, that Eid Echad and Beisurin, this is the Nafkamina, whether it's Eidut or Ne'emanut. But there is a what's it called, a monkey wrench that's thrown in, which is that when they talk about it as if there's two people. They don't seem to indicate that if it was the Eid Echad, that would be enough. But we'll put that on the table and we'll just let it fly for now. Okay. So says the Ktsot, and this is in Siman Kuf Chav Zayin. Yireli. The Ktsot HaChoshen is a commentary on the Shulchan Aruch. It was written about 250 years ago, and it's considered one of the more, right, and he's in debate with the Netivot HaMishpat. I can't remember their names right now, but okay. Yireli. The Shnaim Sheidu Be'echad Shenitna Sechiyano. Let's say two people come forward and say, Michael, they say to you, not you, you have a nice wine, but when they come along and say, someone came along and used your wine for libations, right? Which is now makes it asur hana for you. V'huzmu. And now it turns out they couldn't have possibly known that. Chayavim ha'edim l'shalem dmei hayayin v'chol torat edim zomimim. So here, what testimony are they giving, Danny?
I apostled your wine.
Right, I apostled your wine. Right. So now they have to pay you back your wine. Now that's in the world of Isurim already. That's Shneidim.
Why payback? Zim Zomin, they're punished.
They're punished. What are they trying to do? They tried to defraud you of your wine. We tried to defraud Michael of your wine.
I'm punished.
No, so you threw out your wine because it was asur b'hana. So now they have to pay you back your wine, right? K'chol Torah tedim zomim. Fa'af al gav de bekraktiv kasher zamam la'asot la'achiv. Even though it says only what they tried to do to you, right? They tried to say that you were whatever, and here they didn't say anything about you. V'hanyan mechayvin oto klal ela al hayayin. All I was trying to do, I wasn't saying anything about you that you violated anything. All I was trying to do was say something about your wine. Varayim Verakamah Sanhedrin, Ploni Rav Ashur Shil. Okay, the example doesn't. Okay, so he says, since I'm trying to defraud you of your wine, that's why I'm chayav. Elashesh la'ayin b'mashchat Aram Perakap Milchot Eidud Heidu al Shorosh Aragat Nefesh V'Huzmu. If I testified about your shore that it killed somebody, and then I was mazim, Harayan Loki ben Mishalmin et Kofer. Again, if your animal killed somebody, Michael, so then you have to pay. Right, it killed somebody, so you have to pay knas, right? Because your animal did damage. What if I testified about your animal that did it, and then it turned out I was zomim? So the Rambam says I get malko, but I don't have to pay the kofer. I don't have to pay for what you did. Right? So he says, I'm not 100% sure because there's another example of the other direction, that when I'm creating in the world of Isurin, I'm just trying to defraud you of Mammon, maybe I don't have to do it. Okay. 1 second. Uh-oh. What happened to my... Right. Okay. Right. So he says there's competing sources about this. Okay. The Gemara never says lokin. Okay. There must be some unique case where the shore wasn't chayav skila for some reason, but still he has to pay the money to the guy. Okay. That's not so important. That's right now. The Netivot. So here we see a case where two people are, it's not again a woman, but two people are made by Isurin in the world of Isurin, and they have to, right? They can be made zomim. Ayin Sefer K'tzot HaChoshen says the Netivot on the left-hand side. He says that's Eidim Zomin. It's not the same thing. Delo shayach kasher zamam rak bedavar shetzarich edut bebeit din. Wow, very super interesting, right? All of Masechet Makot, the first chapter, is all limited to the world of Beit Din. It's in the world of courts, then you can have the world of Zomin. Kigon harigat shur. Aval isurin, Michael, if I just come to you and I say, Michael, what happened? I came to you and I said to you, someone came into your house and libated your wine. Is that a word?
Yes.
Okay, I just made it. It's fine. Right? That doesn't happen in court. I just came along and you threw out your wine, and now it turns out that I couldn't have known that information, right? So it says the Netivot.
Unless you drag it to a basin.
No. Michael comes to me a week later and says, Seth, what the heck were you thinking? You made me throw out my wine, and I know that you were at the movies when you said that my wine was libated.
I saw it on Facebook.
Right, yafeh. Exactly that. That's excellent. So says the Netivot, hey, this didn't happen in court. If it didn't happen in court, there's no din of Eidim Zomin. Eidim Zomin is when there was, say the words. Right, when there was Eidut. This isn't Eidut. This is just
somebody said.
Somebody said. So you come along, Michael, and sue me. I say, what do you want? I never gave Eidut in court. Right? Says the Netivot. Right? Go on, we got sure. Right? It's even if you require two people to ruin your wine, you certainly don't know Haggadah Bebeit. Right? Okay? Then he comes along, which he says maybe there's a secondary thing. Right? It's not because the Eidim Zomimim, right? I'm not chayav because I said your yain is na'anesa. I said it because you threw it out. That's why I'm chayav to pay you back. But in the end, he agrees with the halacha that I have to pay you back, but not because of the edim zomim din. Okay? So here, theoretically, we could apply the same thing to eidach hanem and beisurin, right? Would there be, right? The Ketzot seems to say that in the world of Isurim, right, there is Hazama, right? There is Edim Zomin. Therefore, so if you adopt the position of, let's say, the Sifri, that the source of Eidach Hanem and Bisurin is there really is a dude. It's just that there's sometimes, most of the time, Eidud is two people, and every once in a while, when it comes to the world of Isurim, the Eidud is one person. It's not a din of Nemaru, it's especially a dude. Then maybe you're even open to the possibility, maybe, that a woman comes along and says, Nifrash Trumatu Maaser, right? And you ate it, and then it turns out, I don't know, it wasn't. So I don't know. I mean, I don't know what has to happen. Or, you ate non-kosher meat, so then she has to pay you back. For, let's say, in principle, because it turns out she was lying. On the other end, if it's just the name of Ne'amanut, so you can't sue her in court and say, I get it back. Right? If on the other end you say it's just Maisim B'chol Yom, there's no real source for this, or you say, right, like Tosfos wanted to say that it's V'safra Allah, it's a special din in Ne'amanut, right? We trust women, so then there's no reason to think that Hazama would apply in that case. Okay? So that's point number one. Point number one is that the extent to which we adopt the Sifri's position that it's really a din and it's a lower level Eidud, then you might be open to this possibility of Hazama, especially according to the Ketzot. Right? It's not just when there's two people who testify about it, Isurim, but if Eid Echad is Ne'eman like two, so then why not? Right? You can be Mezim her as well. Okay? The second thing that you should be aware of is that if you're open to the Sifri's reading of it, that Eid Echad is really Ne'eman, right? Again, what does the Sifri say? Be'avon, right? You don't need Eid Echad, but Isur, you can have Eid Echad because it's Eidud. Yeah. Right, that's the source. It's not just Ma'asim B'chol Yom. If we take the Sifri, then we're much more open to saying that, like the Tosfot, and not like the Meiri. Right? You remember the Meiri? The Meiri says we never believe a woman. Right? The Tosfot says no, we could believe a woman. Then he has to rein it back a little. Right? Maybe not in Chazak Yisur. Maybe you'd even be open to the possibility that even in Chazak Yisur we could believe women because after all, it's in Eidut. Maybe even, right, or we'd have to say, what happens when you have 1-8 against the Chazak Yisur? What do you do? Mm-hmm. Right, in other words, you're much more open to that if you have a serious source than if you're just saying, it's Maisim B'chol Yom, right? So Tosfot would be better off how he adopted the Sifri to some extent, I think, as opposed to the Meiri who says, no, it's only of the Safra law. There's only one case where we trust women, right? There we have a din of Ne'emanut, but we don't have that any other place. Right? In other words, we wouldn't be able to do it. So that might be another nafkamina. Okay, very quickly, just two more distinctions in the Eidach HaNe'eman. So what we've seen so far is we have multiple sources for Eidach HaNe'eman Beisurin. We have multiple scopes of Eidach HaNe'eman Beisurin. The Meiri, right? Sources, is it Lo Yikav Eidach Had Beish La'avon? But the Yisur can, or it's Eidach Had can have value. Then we're open to the possibility it's really Eidut. Maybe Nafkamina Linyan Hazama. Maybe Nafkamina, can we believe in Doraisa? As opposed to the Meiri who says you can't believe in Doraisa. The scope could be also, do you believe in Doraisa? Doraitas, except when it's Chazak Yisur, or do you not believe at all, except in the case of Nida? That's the Meiri. We could have two other distinctions when it comes to Rav Lichtenstein. He said the Meiri. He said the Ketzos' question is just too good. And the Netiva's question is just too good for the Ketzos. Right? What is he going to say? He's going to say there's Edim Zomin outside of court. No one's going to think that. So Rav Lichtenstein thought that there was actually two tracks of this, testimony when it comes to Yisur. There's in court. But he said you could probably raise the possibility that if the woman came into court and gave testimony about that this was mufrash or whatever, and then it turned out then maybe there would be hazama. Mm-hmm. But if she did it outside of court, there wouldn't be hazama. He conceived of the possibility that maybe Eid Echad could work differently if it was in court or outside of court. I can imagine a case where Eid Echad comes into court and says something. That being said, there might be two other layers in which we could differentiate between Eid Echad and regular Eidut. One is the Tosfot and Kiddushin. Tosfot and Kiddushin says something dramatic, which we also, last year we didn't get to it, but it's worth thinking about. Tosfot says the whole issue of Eid Echad and Yisurin only works in one direction, which he limits the whole issue of Eid Echad and Yisurin to one direction. Says Tzarich Lamar D'Hadarim B'Chol Duchtin Eid Echad and Yisurin Hanu Dafka Lahatir. If the woman comes, or the one witness comes, and is coming to be matir, if he's coming to say, hey, it's all okay. Kigon basar zo minukeret, or chaticha zo shel shuman, and not chelev. Aval le'esur adavar, to make, right? When we say be isur, it's not le'esur. It's only when it comes to asur to be matir. Eino ne'eman, right? It was, no one witness would ever be open. Now, of course, this possibility, right, has to be a din of ne'emanut. And then when it comes to ne'emanut, it's not a din of edud. If edud, why should it make a difference whether you're going positive or negative? Whether you're trying to matir something or asur something. If we believe you, and Eid Echad is believed like two, so then why not just say in every case, right? Two witnesses can come along, Michael, and say the guy was a murderer. Two witnesses can come along and say he wasn't a murderer. Two witnesses come along and say he stole. Some people say no, he found it in Hefker, right? We don't know which direction it goes. To say that we can only believe you in one direction sounds like, oh, there was ne'emanut, right? The Torah was mechadesh, so we believe one witness, or we believe women, or we believe children, and we can believe them in certain things and not believe them in other things, because it's all a chiddush.
Pasuk only excludes avon and fate for Eid Echad. So there's a wide variety of things that don't fall in that.
Correct. So in other words, if it's a dude, on the other hand, if it's a new din and ne'emanut, ma'asim b'chol yom, we believe people, so then why wouldn't you believe people latir and le'esor? Right, so that line of Tosfot seems to definitely go in one direction. Again, that's just an important thing to know. Finally, we can think, at least for a moment, about the B'dikat Chametz thing. So already we said in Tosfot that the B'dikat Chametz thing is unique, is sui generis, right? B'dikat Chametz, we would have thought that even though in general we believe people, we're not right. We have a wide scope of things. B'dikat Chametz wouldn't, because it's too much of an effort and it requires meticulousness. Remember, right? But the question we raised at the beginning is, Danny, I lost the share. Okay, fine. So the question we raised in the beginning is, right? So the question we raised at the beginning is, what does the woman say in B'dikat Chametz? Right? Does she say, I did B'dikat Chametz, or does she say B'dikat Chametz was done by my husband? So the Rif, when the Rif quotes this, I'm sorry you can't see this online, because the Rif quotes these follows against our Gemara. Hechad demuchsaklan badukku. If it was a dalav badukku, right? The case in our Gemara was, we knew that it wasn't, right? The Chabadnik who was giving you the keys to the house in Orlando was away for 6 months. The keys were given to you, they were in a lockbox, it was given to you by the non-Jew. So we know it wasn't baduk, right? The atu nashim avadim muktani, but the wife and the child of the Chabadnik, this is totally the child of the Chabadnik, right? He's running around, and he says, oh, no. Amar Anan bat Kenuha. And they said, we did it. That's different than our Gemara. What did our Gemara say? Bat Kine. He did it. Here they say, Anan bat Kenuha, Ne'eman. Himnu Rabbanan. So here the Ravid jumps all over this. Amar Avraham, this is the Ravid on the Rif, in the Katuv Sham. Hi Lishna Lo Dayak. The Gemara says, the Rif got it wrong. The Rif has the wrong year. There's two different versions of the Gemara. One Gemara is, the child or the woman says, I did it. One woman says, he did it. Do you see that difference? Yeah. So the Rif has, they did. If it's beyond and they could do it, right, and they're saying they did it, we certainly believe them. Says the Ravid, of course we believe them in Deoraitas if they could do it. He says, we'll believe, the Ravid says, even if it's beyond, that overcomes the problem of Chesed Isser. Right? We believe them totally. Right? Just skip the case. Alma, I'm skipping down to the fourth one. Chazaka ein motzin mitachat yadei chatucha ad sheyitol agid bachel mishum bachi ad limite. Hem damer b'diknei alma b'ditun talim milta. Ubiyadam lataken. Afilu ein biyadam lataken al achshav. Even if they can't do it now. Afilu lo yidu alach. Ariyu b'cheskan metukan. Afagav dit chazak isura. B'taima de milta, says the Ravid. This is the key line. Da'kol chaver mitzvah mitzvot. We trust people that they do the religious thing. And therefore, right, we can't trust, just assume that everybody's not trustworthy. He says the opposite of Tosfot. Lidus definitely has Tolaim. And yet we still trust them. It's Chazak Yisur because Biyado overcomes that problem. Tosfot says we wouldn't believe them. Right? It's Tosfot. The Ravid says, excuse me, He says the Rif's Girsa is wrong. Right? The Rif's Girsa, again, we have two Girsa in our Gemara. Did the woman come along and say, or we believe women in Durabanans? So Tosfot said, we believe women in Durabanans because it's too hard to, right? It's very hard, right? B'dikat chametz is unique. Says the Rif, says the Ravid, we believe women in Durabanan when they come along and say their husbands did it. But if they were going to do it themselves, then for sure we believe them. So the Ravid seems to have two tracks in Eidecha. It's not that the Biyad, unlike Tosfot who said Biyado is a totally different track, right? Or maybe actually it's like, no, now I think about it again, maybe it's more like the Tosfot. He says Biyado, that's a, what would you call it? That's a supersized, right, belief.
Yeah.
Once it's Biyado, we believe even though, right? That even a Chazak Isura, he goes, sorry, so he believes that the Biyado is super strong, right? If it's Biyado, we're going to believe even Chazak Isura. Unlike if it's not Biyado, if they say he did it, then already it's only on the Rabbanan level we believe it. So that's even sorry, I said it the opposite way. It's even stronger than Tosfot. He believes that Tosfot is like, he believes that the Biyado is its own track, and that grants you automatic, not immunity, but it grants you automatic believability. Mm-hmm. Right? And again, he's willing to stretch Biyado, not just if you can do it immediately. Remember that Tosfot's line? She can learn Shchita. Yeah. Right?
Yeah.
So here he says, the moment you can do something, we totally trust you. This again is worth thinking about just for a moment. The very fact that you can do something, right? Or we assume, is it that we assume you did it? Or is that we assume that whatever you say now we trust? That's an important question that we have to think about. But either way, what you see here is again different models of Eid Echad. Again, so we saw is Eid Echad Ne'eman B'Yisurin Ne'emanut or Eidut, Nafkamina about Eidim Zomim, Nafkamina the extent to which we believe it does. And then the question of Biyado, is Biyado a separate track that allows you to be believed in more cases than just Eid Echad, right? And Tosfot is not willing to say that we allow you to believe you against the Chazak Isur, even if it's Biyado. The Ravid goes much farther. He says because of the different Girsa in the Gemara, the Rif's Girsa is B'dikat chametz is unique because the guy could do it. The Ravid the woman could do it. The Ritva says that the Ravid says that couldn't possibly be the Girsa. It said the guy could do it. If she could do it, she'd even be believed all right. Then he has, it's like almost anything goes.
Like the thing is, if you don't understand what it is you're seeing as a male aide in court, maybe we don't believe you. In other words, there's a whole idea of what the capability of the aide.
Right. Correct. In other words, we start off asking, could you have done it? If you could have done it, then we don't even get to court. We don't even start anything. Then there's automatic believability. Because it could be there are two tracks here also. Not just Le'esor Le'hetir, but here there's another track. There's a track of Biyado, which gives you super believability, and then there's a track of Eid Echad, which could be Ne'eman or it could be Eidut. But Biyado actually beats out even Eidut. It's even better than that, right? That's the strongest type of formulation that we'll see anywhere in that Ravid. Okay, that's the Eid Echad piece. We have one more thing to do in this Gemara, which is Bitul. Talk about Bitul Chametz. That'll be next time. Next week there's not going to be class because I'm going to be away. In 2 weeks we'll do Bitul Chametz. Thank you.